Well, if you weren't having a terrible day before this episode, you certainly will be after. Welcome, strugglers, to looking back at Berserk, the 1997 anime. Today we're going to be discussing episode 4, The Hand of God. This is a really big episode because we start getting into Guts' childhood, his past traumas. We'll be discussing the differences between the anime and the manga, so things are going to get pretty heavy. Let's start with an episode recap, and then we'll discuss. The episode opens up with Void's monologue, per usual. Then we get a quick recap of last week's episode, going into the opening theme. Out of the opening theme, we get the aftermath of the party. Guts is sitting alone, and Judo comes to talk to him. They talk about Guts' feelings about the Band of the Hawk. Then Judo briefly talks about Griffith, how his leadership inspires everyone. Casca comes to get Guts, saying Griffith needs him. Guts and Griffith have a water fight, a moment of levity. Guts notices the bailet. Griffith talks about it briefly, saying the old fortune-teller woman who gave it to him said whoever possesses it will rule the world in exchange for flesh and blood. It's called the Egg of the King. Its eyes open while Guts holds it. Griffith talks more about his kingdom. The Band of the Hawk charges into battle and Guts flashes back to his childhood. He's recalling his time with Gambino. We see Guts assisting Gambino in battle. Then we see Guts training with Gambino. Guts is using a sword that's far too big for him. Old habits die hard, thankfully. We get some exposition from some of Gambino's crew. They say Guts was born from a corpse, and Gambino's wife, Shisu, found him. They say she was cursed because of it, and is now dead. We see Guts' first real battle. He kills a soldier. He is then almost killed, but Gambino saves him. Guts gives the money he earned to Gambino. Gambino gives him 1 coin. In another battle, we see Gambino losing his leg. Then we see Gambino sitting in a chair on a hill. Guts comes over after a battle and tries to give the spoils to him. He yells at Guts and hits him. He says that he needs meat for his dog. Some of Gambino's crew make fun of Gambino, saying he's got it good now. Gambino is furious. Gambino comes into Guts' tent. He attacks him with his sword. He tells him he should be dead. It's his fault Shisu is dead. He says that Guts has cursed him. He cuts Guts' nose. Guts picks up his sword. He stabs him in self-defense, and Gambino dies. Gambino's crew finds them, and Guts has to go on the run. He is shot with a crossbow and falls off his horse, rolling down a cliff. Guts wakes up in the moonlight on what appears to be an iced-over lake. It's an absolutely beautiful shot. He starts to walk. He doesn't know where he's going. He just keeps moving. A pack of wolves attacks him, and he kills one. He says he just kills enemies to survive. He asks himself, where does he want to go? He and Griffith meet up after the battle. Griffith talks about how he knows there's something more for himself. He tells Guts that this is the only time he's confided in someone. Rickert knocks Guts into the water in a really funny scene. He says he wants to congratulate Guts on being named the commander of the Raiders. Then Pippin knocks both of them into the moat. Casca watches on. 3 years pass. We see the Midland Army struggling with a Black Ram heavy cavalry. We see our boy Guts about to jack everybody up. He kills a couple of them, and then the rest of the Band of the Hawk follows Griffith into the battle. And that's the end of this episode. Alright, so let's really dive into this episode and talk about Guts' childhood. I feel like this episode does a pretty good job of showing the Guts-Gambino dynamic. You see that Guts is looking for that fatherly figure. He's looking for affirmation, love, comfort, and Gambino is just not the guy to give that. And it just gets worse over time, especially after Gambino loses his leg, and it ultimately culminates in Guts having to kill Gambino, something that's going to haunt him for the rest of his days. The big difference between the anime and the manga is that the anime leaves out Gambino selling Guts to Donovan, and then Donovan assaulting Guts. Guts kills Donovan, and this is a very, very traumatic experience for Guts. It is one of the toughest portions of the manga to read. I'm not going to lie to you. I reread Berserk every single year, and there are times when I skip this portion of the manga. That being said, it's incredibly important to who Guts is and what he has to heal from, and ultimately the trauma that also occurs during the eclipse, it all ties together, and not including it in the anime lessens the extent of that healing and the trauma that happens. I understand why they didn't include it though, because it is very, very tough. But you get little hints of what happened with Guts saying, "Don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me." I've always felt like that stemmed from what happens with him and Donovan. So you get a little bit of that, but in the flashback, you don't actually see what happens. So that's the biggest difference here. Ultimately, I think this episode does a good job of showing why Guts had such a tough childhood, even though it leaves some of those things out. Now, I want to talk briefly about one of my favorite scenes from the anime, and it's when Guts, he's shot with a crossbow, he falls off his horse, and then we see Guts wake up on the ice over lake. And then Guts, he's absolutely defeated in this moment. He's injured, he's got the arrow sticking out of him, he's exhausted, he's just killed Gambino, and yet he gets up and he puts one foot in front of the other. And he keeps moving. He can't stop himself, right? Even though he feels defeated, he doesn't stop. And then a pack of wolves attack him. And even when he feels like this is it, I'm going to die, he keeps fighting. And that is what defines Guts as a character. He doesn't give up no matter the odds, no matter how tired he is. He always pushes forward. And I think that's why Guts is one of my favorite characters, and one of the reasons why I love Berserk so much. I found Berserk during a really tough time in my life, and relating to Guts in that sense of he just overcomes the odds, and no matter what happens to him, he keeps going. And I really love that. And it's one of the reasons why I love him as a character so much. So that's it for this episode. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Please subscribe, comment, like, and I will see you all next time.